Hi everyone, this is Mohammed, founder of Akram Insurance Advisory and Tax Firm, and we are here to discuss the latest cybersecurity threats and best practices for alternative investment firms. I have a great panel today. I will ask them to make an intro and then we can start the discussion soon. So go ahead, Michael, can you please make an intro?
Oh, sure, certainly. Thank you very much. My name is Michael Bryce. I'm the president of BW Cyber. We're located throughout the U.S. We've been working in this industry, specifically PE, hedge, as well as NFA, CFTC, and FINRA, focusing on regulatory compliance for cybersecurity. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm going to speak today based on our experiences doing forensic analysis, as well as supporting our clients. And when I say forensic analysis, I mean actually going head-to-head against criminals out of Eastern Europe, as well as Nigeria, the two, if you're familiar with the industry. One set of those tend to be very good at ransomware. That's the ones out of Eastern Europe. The other set, Nigeria, tend to be exceptional at wire fraud. And candidly, while they're both industry terms that I think everybody here has heard about for the alternatives industry, I would have you all think wire fraud, wire fraud, wire fraud.
Anthony, please.
Thank you, Mohammed. Anthony Masha. I'm a partner at EFSI. We're a privately held fund administration firm. We focus on startup and emerging managers. And we know very well what's going on in the industry about cyber criminals and wire fraud, as Michael mentioned. And thankful to be here to kind of give you my take on what we're seeing in the industry, and hopefully it can be as helpful as possible to any fund manager or investor out there that may have an incident with the cyber criminal.
Awesome, thank you. Steve?
Hello everyone, Steve Rosen here. I'm a senior manager with Akram Insurance and Advisory. I guess I'm part of this panel just to give my input on my past experience, having seen some of these firsthand. And you know, I hope somebody gets something out of it, good, bad, or indifferent.
And Steve, just before joining Akram, you were part of the alternative investment firm in the accounting and finance.
Yes, yes.
Awesome, thank you. Let's get the ball rolling. Okay, so I will do some housekeeping items. Obviously, you guys know that you can earn the CPE, and in order to earn the CPE, we will ask you 4 questions. Out of 4, you need to answer 3 questions. And if you don't hear from us regarding the CPE certificate, please reach out to us, and we will be happy to answer any questions you have regarding the CPE. Okay. So we are done with our intro. Let's overall, right? Okay, so give me 1 second. Yes, Michael, so tell us a little bit about the landscape of cybersecurity. I know that these are the very growing industry. Criminals are getting more like smart, and the gateholders are also getting their best job. So tell us a 30,000 feet view where the industry is and how do you see in the coming years?
Yeah, let's start with, you know, the nature of the threat. If you think about risk reward, when we deal with our managers, they're the best risk reward assessors in the world, without a doubt. You all in the alternatives industry have to be able to take your clients hundreds of millions or billions of dollars and make money. Well, think about a risk reward scenario when there's no risk and the reward can be almost unlimited. That's the holy grail. And that's what we're seeing right now with cyber criminals attacking the alts industry, whether it be hedge, PE, CTAs, CPOs, family offices. They can do this from overseas with impunity. We cannot do anything. The FBI's got, you know, they're focused on shore. We're not really doing anything offshore. And by the way, where these criminals are coming from, it's countries that we don't even have a relationship if we talk about coming out of Eastern Europe and especially Russia. So the point I want to make to you all is there are individuals out there who are much, much better at targeting you than you can ever imagine, monetizing your trust of the internet or your belief in email, and doing it in a way that will result in hundreds of thousands and millions of dollars of gain. And I've gone against these guys, and here's what I can tell you. Even today, the best we can do is look in the rearview mirror and tell you what they were doing last month, last week, maybe this morning, based on the forensics that we've done against these guys. But I sure as heck can't tell you what they're going to do tomorrow, other than they're going to be better. I am seeing so much wire fraud with our government unable to do anything about it, and people aren't even talking about it because they're embarrassed. And imagine you're a manager and you've lost money. You don't want your investors to know that. So you may eat it, you may hide it, but I certainly guarantee you're not going to go to a conference and tell everybody about it. I'm here to tell you that they do tell me at the conference after the second beer. That's how we make a living in this business, and I just want to make sure you should all be aware it is scary. That's the background. The other thing I would tell you, and we'll talk about this, whether it's ChatGPT or other AI machine learning language capabilities, the ability for criminals to target the alts industry has gone up exponentially, because now you're not going to see the spelling errors. Now you're not going to see the goofy vernacular. And there are even machines out to help do security breaches and make it much more simple to break in. If I'm scaring you, you should be scared. The best part of this, though, and I sincerely mean what I say, although it's going to come across as a little bit funny because it's meant to be that way. There's the old joke about going through the woods with a friend and you run into a bear, and your friend sits down and puts on his tennis shoes, and you say, "What the heck are you doing? You can't outrun the bear." And your friend says, "I don't need to. I just need to outrun you." And the purpose of cybersecurity is criminals tend to be relatively lazy and going for easy targets of opportunity. Don't let yourself be that easy target of opportunity.
Well said. Thank you, Mike. So, Anthony, what do you see from the fund administration point of view? That is this a headache? Is this an opportunity for you, or how do you see this world? What might?
Thank you, Mohammed. Well, I just want to add one more thing there. You know, these criminals are relentless, right? For them, they'll just continue. It doesn't matter. It's very easy to send a bogus email and to try to, I wouldn't say it's easy to infiltrate, but it's becoming easier and easier to infiltrate an organization, especially a smaller organization that may not have, you know, the support around them, which they should have. And it's probably not as expensive as you would think to kind of get some help in helping being supported against some of these criminals. For us, look, it's a threat, and it's actually it's a good thing, right? Because for us, we want to be able, EFSI wants to be on the forefront of this, right? So we lean on groups like BW, Michael Bryce and his team, because we want to be ahead of the curve. As Michael said, look, the best we can do is know what the criminals did this morning or yesterday. But if we can constantly educate our employees as well as our clients and their clients, we're hopeful that with all the constant reminders that we can be ahead of some of the other administrators out there and trying to recognize that cyber crime is real. And as Michael said, I mean, people are not talking about it, but it's prevalent. And it's also a headache because you have to constantly educate, right? And you have to, you know, you're constantly being threatened. And for us, we're being targeted because we move money, we wire money for our clients and their clients. And it's very easy to have someone manipulate, you know, a human being, because there's always human error. So you just want to be able to educate your employees, their clients, our clients and their clients as best as possible.
Okay. Steve, being an auditor or part of the fund manager finance team, what do you think where these threats are, and how do you think the future will be?
Well, again, thank you, Mohammed. In my past experience, I've noticed both when I worked, you know, at the investment manager and when I worked at a bigger firm as well, they tended to go after the higher level people as opposed to the lower level people, right? And they would do that, you know, simply because the higher level people never showed up for training, and they don't have the time to be bothered with checking the emails to see if they're really legitimate or not. the lower level people, the younger staff, they were more in tune. So my experience has been that they tend to, like I said, it's easy enough to go on LinkedIn, pick a company, see who the CFO is, the COO is, and just start bashing emails their way. And if one person clicks, they hit the jackpot for one person in 5 minutes. So to me, the quarterly training or semi-annual training, whatever was given, should continue to be given, and everybody should pay attention to it.
Absolutely. Thank you, Steve. So, Anthony, obviously you are running a fund admin job, and some of the team members are responsible for moving the money around according to the instructions of the fund manager. Have you seen any data breaches at their end, and can you share with us any insight?
Yeah, I mean, so we've had several clients who have been whose emails have been breached, and then they'll be in the background, these criminals, and Michael can kind of give you some real figures, but these criminals are in the background for 6 months to a year, watching emails go back and forth, right? And as Michael said earlier, emails are unsafe. So anyone who's sending privacy sensitive information via email, stop right now. All right, there are enough tools and programs out there to send data through a secure portal. Start using those. We've seen clients whose emails have gotten breached, and we've gotten fraudulent wire emails. And sometimes you're able to pick up on it earlier. There has been 1 or 2 incidences where we've gone to the bank and the bank has said, well, the money that they're requesting to wire is more than that's in the fund bank account, right? So thankfully, we have other partners around us that are keeping an eye out as well. So it's not solely you as the third party service provider. You want to be able to help the people around you and make sure that the people around you and the other people you're working with be educated as well. So now you have additional layers of potentially, hopefully stopping an attack from happening. But look, I mean, as Michael said, there are a lot of attacks that have happened, and people are not opening their mouths about it. I think we need to be more vocal, because that's only going to help. I don't know about eliminate, but help definitely reduce the amount of fraud that's been going on in our industry.
Michael, have you seen these data breaches quite often, and what the best practices? How do you usually advise your client in case if any data is breached?
Yeah, I've seen hundreds, and it's almost always an email breach where you get an email and they ask you to log in and put in your user ID and password, flat out. That's it every time. You stop that, you're going to stop this whole email problem. You're going to stop all the other problems. But a couple of things I want to mention here. Anthony hit the nail on the head. When you're dealing with subscription documentation, capital calls, redemptions, that should never, ever go through email. It should go through your portal. The other point I want to make here is that if you're not using multi-factor authentication, that's a way to stop a lot of this. But what I want to point out here, criminals have a motivation. It's almost entirely monetary focused, but the side effects for investment managers are reputational and litigatory, okay, and regulatory. And the point I'll make here is you get a data breach and you've got PII that includes subscription documentation, and you have a wire, however it goes, you got a multifaceted issue that you don't want, especially when ODD time comes with an institutional investor.
Thank you. Let's get the ball rolling. Any insight? What are those ransomware attacks? Any past attacks, and what are the best steps we can take to avoid those going forward?
Yeah, I'll be brief on this one because it's not terribly focused on the asset management industry. But we deal with a lot of PE portfolio companies in which we do pre and post acquisition due diligence. And those portcos, especially the mid-market portcos that have operations and manufacturing, are heavily targeted because they can monetize them to the term of $1 million plus to extort them. And basically, if you're not familiar with ransom, it's just software that downloads onto your computer and gets into the company and shuts everything down. And the only way you get it back up is to get the key, the password. Again, if you're an asset management firm and you get ransomware, and I've seen this before, it locks your computer up. Well, maybe no big deal. You're on OneDrive, your data's backed up. Okay, who cares? If the data's not backed up, I mean, shame on you. Okay, you might have to pay this ransom. Maybe it's $25,000. Still, that's a lot of money. What I would say though is really criminals are trying to make money by extorting, and most of the criminals doing ransom attacks are coming out of Eastern Europe.
Michael, you have mentioned multiple times Eastern Europe. Is there any reason that that area is more prone for criminals?
Yeah.
I'm curious.
Yeah, it's interesting. The U.S. leads the world with others like the Israelis catching up in internet technology advancement. Why is that? It's because it all started from ARPANET in Silicon Valley. 2 guys, 4 guys and gals, 16, 32, and they centers of excellence throughout California. If you think about it, the US in Southern California was the worldwide headquarters for internet technologies. It's the same with crime. You get a couple of, Boris and you name some other name out of Eastern Europe, and they get good at ransom, and they get 2 buddies, and pretty soon they splinter off into their own ransom group, and what you end up having are centers of excellence. And there are these organized crime centers of excellence that are in Eastern Europe for ransom, and they're the same organized crime centers of excellence for wire fraud coming out of Nigeria. And by the way, with the Nigerians, they understand wire fraud and the US legal system better than we do. And that's how they can take your money, bounce it from bank to bank, and be 2, 3, 4 steps ahead of the FBI while they're trying to track that money down. It's amazing. I'll just say, so that's my short answer on why Eastern Europe and Nigeria. Doesn't mean it's not happening in other places, but it's centers of excellence.
Well, thank you. That was a really good example the way you told us that, just from the Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. So let's continue the discussion. Steve, is anything you aware of phishing and this social engineering, right? Have you seen more emails in our inbox these days? Any insight? How any incident could happen?
Right. So I will say for myself, I haven't noticed any to my work inbox. I can say that in my prior firm, well, not firm, but the prior investment manager I worked at, we saw quite a bit of them. And as I mentioned earlier, they were typically targeted at, senior level and above. We would also have quarterly, our IT people would send out quarterly emails to see who they could catch and who they couldn't. And, even to my surprise, right, we would have anywhere between 10 and 15% of the people who would fail and actually click into the phishing email. And out of those 10 to 15%, 90% of those were executives. It wasn't happening at the lower levels as much as it was happening at the higher levels. So if you were happening at the higher level, if you've infiltrated somebody at a higher level, you have almost the keys to the car, right? And that's what these people want, right? And I've also seen where one of our legal counsel staff got an email from what they thought was our usual vendor to pay an invoice. They paid the invoice, right? They clicked the link, they paid their invoice, did all the usual stuff, password, username, password, payment information, bank information, bill paid. 3 days later, their boss comes and goes, how many bills did you pay? Person says 1. Boss says, well, how come it looks like you paid 300?
Right.
So again, it's a matter of just being on your toes and paying attention.
Michael, is there anything you can recommend here when people do other than the training to the employees or best practice? Is there any quick?
Every company out there should have a phishing program directed at their employees every quarter. We do that for all of our clients. Every quarter we phish them, just like we've learned from criminals overseas. And I kind of close this subject by saying it's always the same, guys. They want you to put in your user ID and password. So anytime you get an email with a link or some request to put your user ID and password in, first off, the answer should be no way, keeping it clean here. And then the other should be pick up the phone and call the person. You know what? Maybe 3 out of 4 times it's real. That should freak you out knowing 1 out of 4 times it's a fake.
Right. True. So, Anthony, do you do anything at your firm to avoid this situation?
Well, I mean, as Michael said, and everybody else, you know, you do quarterly phishing campaigns to try to make sure that your employees are being, again, educated so that they're not clicking on things. I also too, I think everyone needs to, everybody's busy, right? Especially in this industry right now, things are very, very busy, but sometimes you got to just take a minute or a couple of seconds to breathe and look at an email. If the email if it looks suspicious, most have an IT department, right? Send it to another employee, or say have another employee look at it and say, does this look real? Or, you know, if there's, for example, I think, Michael, we did a phishing campaign, right, where you had sent out to my employees, you know, an email from me that looked like it was coming from me, and I think you had changed one of the letters in my email URL, right? And I think we had 2 people who clicked on it, and it's like,
Anthony, they didn't just click on it, they put their credentials in also.
Put their credentials in it, and I'm like, you have my phone number, right? Pick up the phone and call me and say, hey Anthony, did you just send this to me, right? And sometimes, again, we're busy and we're moving quickly, and we have clients that are calling, and you know, and clients are demanding, right? They want things done yesterday. But at the end of the day, tell people they got to relax, because if we make a mistake, it's going to cost us, you, and if anybody makes a mistake, it's going to hurt anyone around you. So take a second just to kind of view the email or look at what's being sent. Most of the time, it'll be presented as, let's just say, Anthony Masha, right? But if you look at the actual email address, it's someone out of Japan or from a trucking company. It'll say Anthony Masha at, you know, and then it'll say John at liverydelivery.com, right? And if you notice that, you know, it's not that difficult. I think people rush through a lot of things. And again, people, I hate to say it, adults are like children. They need constant reminders, they need constant education, including myself. My wife will tell you that all the time.
Let's put a little saying on this. People only respect what you inspect.
Right. True. Very well said. Okay, so time for our first polling questions. People who are interested to get the CPEs. So I'm going to launch and we will come back with you. Okay, so most of people responded by unauthorized access to sensitive data. So let's continue the discussion, right? Insider threats. So Michael, can you please tell us any thing regarding insider threat? Have you experienced those, and what is the solution for those threats?
Yeah, so insider threat, we refer to that also as malicious insider. It's when you've got a disgruntled employee and they're taking information that is critical to the company. Often it can be customer data, proprietary data with the bigger houses, crown jewel information. At the end of the day, though, I see you down here, unintentional actions, that's what we used to call the unintentional insider, which is, and I find this funny, repeat offenders on the phishing campaign are very disturbing because it means, and you do have to follow up on your training, those are the people who are going to become your insider threat, even if they're not malicious insiders, because despite being educated, they're just not taking the time to take this seriously. I will say, one follow-up thought, Steve, to what you were saying, we are now seeing interns being targeted on day one. So it is summertime. I know we're heading into the fall, but just remember, organizations that put the, welcome to our intern class up on the LinkedIn, they're getting hammered about 5 minutes later. So, maybe for next spring, don't put your interns on LinkedIn.
True.
So, in those situations, are there some IT tools firms can deploy at their servers so no one can steal the data, or how do you manage this threat, Michael?
I know how I would do it. No, I'm kidding.
No, look, the number one way to manage this is through ID access and management. It just means, privilege, reduced privilege, so only the senior members have access. But there's some other controls for large organizations, not necessarily for emerging managers or mid-level managers, things called data loss protection, where you can see who's downloading what, why they did it, when they did it. We are seeing more and more of these tools becoming more economical through the Microsoft stack. So I would just say, yeah, whenever you've got an employee who you might be pushing out and you're still giving them 2 weeks, you might want to either track to see what they're downloading or restrict their privileges, because they should not have access to your entire environment. And most organizations that are smaller, we find everybody trusts everybody until somebody gets fired.
Right. So I just want to piggyback on that for 1 second, Michael. So in my prior employment, if they were going to fire somebody, you wouldn't even get the chance. You would walk in the morning and you would already have HR, security, and everybody at your desk, and they would escort you out the door. You never had the chance, right? Just to avoid this issue. It was done. Your access was stripped away the night before, and when they came in the morning, the only thing they weren't even allowed to pack up their desk. They were just taken right out the door, so they couldn't access anything and potentially do damage to any of the company information or infrastructure.
Anthony, would you like to add something?
Yeah, I mean, I think Michael said it. There's a lot of monitoring tools that are available. We have monitoring tools. You give certain employees, some senior employee access. There are certain things that they can't, that other employees can't access. And then there are tools out there that see who's downloading what. I mean, obviously, if there's someone downloading sensitive information and then emailing it to their personal email address, then you know that there's some sort of issue there. The other thing is, for us, everything is on a company laptop. No one's allowed to use their own personal laptop and or desktop. We just don't allow it. That's something we implemented pre-COVID for security reasons, because there was a lot to manage, right? If your kids start jumping on your computer at home and they're clicking around, around your work stuff, that could be an issue. So it started that way, and then it actually is beneficial in ways of making sure that there weren't any disgruntled employees trying to steal sensitive information.
Okay, thank you, all of you. That was very informative for me, and I hope it is good for listeners too. Anthony, would you identify some third-party risk here when investment firms bring certain service providers and how they should manage that risk?
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, it goes back to education, right? And working with, other service providers. Mohammed, we have a great working relationship. We understand how your organization operates. I think you would say the same about EFSI. You want to just make sure that the firms you're working with in collaboration with the client, again, educated on this subject. The riskiest thing for us, I would say, and for investment managers is really their clients, right? You have a 75-year-old investor, right, who is not completely tech savvy, and their email gets breached. They don't recognize it, and then those emails are being sent to us and to other service providers on the manager's account. That's a risk. So managers, again, as much as I don't want to keep beating a dead horse here, you have to educate your investors as well, because they're a risk to you. I know they're giving you money and allocating money to your fund, but at the end of the day, they can cost you money because they can request a redemption that could go directly to the admin without it even being funneled to the manager, or it could come, again, these criminals, they have things so teed up to where they could take control of the manager as well as the investor, and then everything, the only equation that's not completed is as the administrator, right? And so yeah, there's a lot of moving parts. I think again, I think it's about education. There's always going to be risk in this industry. We deal with a lot of money that moves in and out on a daily basis. So just making sure that the relationships you work with, are educated and are all making sure that we stay on top of these things.
Right. Michael, thank you, Anthony. I know supply chain attacks may not be relevant to the investment firm, but have you seen, Mike, any example in the past?
Yeah. Supply chain attacks, there's almost nothing you can do about it. An example of a supply chain attack is there's a software called SolarWinds. It's used by IT service providers to basically get into your computer, and they had an issue where someone got into their system and then got in. It happened to Kaseya, I believe, as well. At the end of the day, though, this is really an issue for much larger companies, because you see this with nation state attacks and getting into defense contractors and the government, things like that.
Thank you. So this is the area, right, where all are worried about, especially our fund managers. So what are the SEC guidelines if any data is breached or any compromise happened? Can you share some insight, Michael, on that?
Absolutely. That's what I do. Basically, the SEC is making a big push on cyber regulatory compliance. If you're not familiar with this, they've got some regulations that have been pending since late last year. But the point I want to make here is those requirements relate to the need to have a DR, disaster recovery business continuity plan, to do an annual risk assessment, to have written security policies. The term WISP might resonate. You also have to have an incident response plan, and you have to do annual disaster recovery testing, different from a DR test. Relatedly, they're talking about having basically, I want to say 96 hours, I think is the right time, to respond to an incident, which is pretty disconcerting because it's almost impossible to tell what an incident is, especially within 96 hours. And then they also want you to do critical third-party vendor assessments. That's a whole lot to lump in here. The point I want to make is this is coming to the entire investment industry. Most organizations that are over $1 billion AUM are already doing all of these things because two reasons. One, what was formerly called OC, which is now the directorate, has already sent risk alerts out on all of this, which means if one of these things happens to you and results in a data breach and a loss of like a wire fraud or some other client issue, they're going to hammer you for it. even though it's not a rule, the directorate said it's a risk alert, you should do it. The other is for operational due diligence. With institutional investors, they're now looking for all that. They're looking for investment quality, cybersecurity protection. So the point I want to make, and there's one other, and that is cybersecurity training, what we're doing here. It is, I think, critical to have a cyber compliance package that's escalated to the CCO's level.
So is this on the top of the agenda of SEC, how they consider this, and are the emerging managers or the fund manager taking it seriously?
Yeah, so for emerging managers, we work with quite a few emerging managers for two reasons. First off, again, the issue is a matter of risk, and that is if you get breached, you don't want to be the example because you didn't listen to the risk alerts. We all know that discretionary spending is always a challenge when you're sitting there at 150 or 200 million AUM. But the other issue related to that, it's also a reputational issue. You know, if you're an emerging manager and you do something that allows you to have a breach, now you have to report it, and it's an ODD red flag. And as you know, most of the emerging managers we work with are eager to get institutional investment and to be institutional grade investing. So I would just say, you know, what we're seeing on ODD and the SEC is a very tight, myopic focus on cyber regulatory compliance and cyber hygiene.
Okay, thank you. Awesome. Steve, anything from your experience when you were working with the investment manager, that SEC, when they come for exam, do they really focus on this cybersecurity?
Right. So when I went through the couple of SEC exams that I went through, they weren't laser focused on cybersecurity as much as they were laser focused on policy, right? So they, at that time, they were more worried about people following the policy and making sure that all that stuff is in place. Now that we've moved however many years past that, let's say it's 6-7 years past that, now they're actually getting into the nuts and bolts of everything, and they want to make sure that everything is, even if you have the policy, not only are you following it, but you're also enhancing it to keep up with these, with these people that are trying to, whether it be extort or hit you hard, whatever it is, right? They want to make sure they, ultimately the SEC's goal is to protect the investor money, right? Yeah. And this has now become a big part of protecting the investor money.
Yeah. Absolutely. Okay, it's a time for our next polling question. So I'm going to launch and I will come back within a minute. Okay, so this is the area I believe, Michael, you really do well, and this is part of your business too, right? How do you help the organizations, the fund managers, the fund admins, the other funds who seek help, and how long those training sessions are, how costly they are, what tell us for if there are some fund managers on this call, if they want to reach out to you, so just give them overall big.
I appreciate that, and look, what I would say is it's much more fulfilling to see our clients focus on preparedness and prevention versus response and recovery. And in this instance, probably the best two controls that any manager can invest in related to cybersecurity is phishing and training. And the reason why I mean that is they go together. I do want to kind of warn you, there's some commoditized training services out there that I kind of find to be actually a false positive, because they're so obvious. People think that that's how criminals are. The way we approach this is we train our managers and their team for a full hour. It is a regulatory requirement, by the way, whether you're NFA or SEC. And we incorporate what we consider to be a bespoke phishing campaign that goes with that. We attack them just like candidly the Nigerians would. And you know, Steve was talking about 10-15% pop rate. Yeah, we're hitting that. The scary thing here, though, is the kind of stuff we're doing. I know for a fact we could talk people into doing fake wires. The good news is after we scare the bejeez out of them one or two times, we see a tremendous increase in awareness and understanding. The one other thing I would mention here, though, is awareness and training isn't just cybersecurity generic. It's not just, okay, we're going to phish you, but it goes to the HR department, and I'll tell you why. If your HR department actually handles payroll and you receive an email from somebody that says, hey, I've changed my direct deposit, good chance that's fake. And I know that because I've seen it a lot, and it actually happened to one of my best friends, and his wife is the director of HR. They didn't speak for a month because he lost 3 months pay. That's an interesting one. I saw another situation where we're seeing these CFOs who don't have policies for wire transfer. And it blows me away. And they go, oh, no, we're fine. We've got all these controls. I'm like, let me see your policy. Well, and they start to tell me the policy, or they say, they can't get us because we've got a key fob. And the point I want to make is I wouldn't consider that arrogance. I would consider that a need to understand the nature of the threat. And what I would say is probably, this is a big number, 15 to 20% of our clients have had a wire fraud loss. And those losses are anywhere in the low number, maybe around 75K, and then the high number is over $1 million. So if you think about that kind of risk, it's candidly insane to me that a manager wouldn't demand that their CFO has a written wire transfer policy. And we prefer a cash management policy in the asset management vertical, cash management policy from start to finish, where we can then go in and kick the tires and show them how a criminal would break the controls there via cyber. And then educate them. And the kind of the so what on all of this is, and we've already seen this. You get a call. You being the finance department, or you being a manager, or you being a CFO, get a call from one of your investors, and it's their caller ID, and you recognize their voice, and they say, hey, Bob, John, Mary Jane, I need to do a redemption. I've changed my wiring instructions because Silicon Valley Bank, all that whole thing, or First Republic, and now I'm with Bank of America. Here are my new wiring instructions. And you do it because caller ID and voice recognition. And I'm here to tell you, first off, caller ID spoofing, piece of cake. We do it all the time. Voice translation to support recognition now through ChatGPT and others, it's what you'd call a deep fake, piece of cake. And people don't realize this and think they have all these controls when in fact they are the control failure. So I just want to make sure you understand it's not, and as soon as I explain it to you all that way, it's not rocket science. This is not some crazy program that has to come out of North Korea. All of these guys, once they learn it, in these centers of excellence, all their friends know about it. So you don't just have one person who's really good at using ChatGPT to attack you. You've got dozens, and in another year it'll be hundreds, and another 2 or 3 years it'll be thousands. So that's the point on training that I want to make.
Yeah,
Can you ask one question here, Michael? So why Nigerians made such a big name in the industry? Right?
I don't know how they got good at it. I'm just letting you know, I give them huge kudos for how well they are tricking the people we deal with, and how well, I mean, I dealt with one recently. It's heartbreaking, a couple 100,000, and they've continued to monetize. And it's kind of a scam here. Once they get original money in some instances, and I'm going to go outside the alternatives industry, they'll trick people into thinking they have money, and then they're going to tell them, well, now you have to pay taxes, or there's a fine because you didn't report it. And people continue to go with this. And the funny thing is, I'm seeing these scams across the board. I'm like, I've seen that 4 times this week. It's not the same guy. I know it's not. I'm looking at the IPs. They're from different parts of the world, but it all comes back to one smart person figures it out, and then he or she and their buddy do it, and they can't not brag about it, and pretty soon it becomes that center of excellence for this new attack. And guess what? As quickly as the attack method proliferates overseas through these centers of excellence, we are inversely slow to learn and respond, which is why people are still falling to basic wire fraud. I would say the alternatives industry is getting much, much, much better. The industry that's not is an industry in operations in the mid-market, 100 million to 500 million in revenue, where it's a mom and pop and they still haven't learned this.
Okay, kudos to them. They learned something. Okay, weak authentication and access controls. Probably, I think you will, Michael, help us on that. Anthony, you can shed some light. What controls, access controls you are putting at your...
Yeah, I mean, again, I think, moving data in the secure portal, right? Nothing via email, and MFA or 2FA. But Michael and I were talking earlier, there's a new spoofing thing that's coming out called MFA fatigue. And it's basically, and Michael can kind of walk you through what it is, but it's...
Anthony, but before you poo-poo the control, though, let's explain the control first, and then explain how people need to be aware here, because I do believe in MFA. So let's not say MFA is bad.
No. Listen, MFA is we need to do it. We need to use it for sure. But I'm just letting people know that they're already trying to spoof MFA and aggravate people's lack of patience to try to get for that.
Successfully.
So, Michael, maybe you can explain it to them.
No. I'm with you, Anthony. The point here is it does get back to training again that people understand. So for our listeners, multi-factor authentication. It just means when you get an SMS text, like you're trying to get in your bank and they send you the SMS text or something similar like an authentication push. And what Anthony's talking about is these same criminals. By the way, that's not just the ones that are doing the MFA authentication, what he's calling the way they're subverting it by tricking people. They've already gotten good around the world. It's already known to everyone, and that is they're just going to start I've seen this. They hammer people. They've stolen their user ID and password, and they keep trying to log in. And you're sitting here going, why do I keep getting these SMSs, or why am I getting this authentication push? And people get tired of it. That's the fatigue part. It's Friday night. They're drinking, they're fighting with the wife, they're upset with the kids, who knows what's going on. And they hit the authenticate button to shut it up. And they just gave people access to their environment, even though they have a strong password, a strong user ID, and they've got multi-factor. So what Anthony's hitting at here is very prevalent now. I want to make everybody aware of it, and it gets back to training. I'm a strong believer in MFA, and I'm also a strong believer in training so that people understand how it can be subverted. And guess what? In another year or two, we're going to come up with passwordless authentication. That's going to be the new panacea. 6 months later, I'm going to be telling people how the criminals are already getting around it.
Okay. Awesome. So time for next polling questions, and hopefully we can wrap this up in the next 10 minutes. Let's launch the third poll. Okay, awesome. So we are done with that. So this is the last part, right? Then we have the 4 polling questions. We will do that in a bit. These are the recommended cybersecurity strategies and tips right here. Michael, what would you think are the most important from that list?
Training. The other, because a lot of this has a cost. You all know that. Policy. And you know, when I say policy, I hate that term because it sounds so academic. But in the security world, every company and every organization we work with, we believe, should have a set of 5 to at most 10 security policies. And you should force your IT managed service provider, if you're a smaller firm, basically less than 20 or 30 people, if you've got an IT director, you should force that IT director to basically prove to you on a monthly basis that you are at 100% compliance to those 5 to 10 security policies. And let me explain what I mean to that. A security policy may just be that we have antivirus loaded on every computer. Sounds basic. You all assume that. I assume that when I work in a company. Turns out most companies aren't that good at actually keeping up with it. Those things hang, they don't work, and they don't know, and they don't check. And the reason for this, and the reason why I'm a big believer first on training, we've talked about that today, on the policies here, 80-20, Pareto. 80% of your threat is going to be remediated by 20% of the controls. But the reason why that 20% is not usually properly managed, and I learned this as a chief information officer, when my CEO's computer didn't work, Michael Bryce got a phone call. When the chief operating officer didn't have access to the internet, Michael Bryce got a phone call. When AV wasn't working, nobody called Michael Bryce until they got a virus. But there could be 20, 30 different controls failing that we don't know about, that you don't know until you know. And unfortunately, when you know, when on security, it's too late. So that's the other side of that. I do think everything that we've got here is important. I would just say that when you create a program, you need to work with a vendor you trust. We run into a lot of vendors who are going to sell you everything, the kitchen sink and the farm, and security doesn't work that way. Security is based on your threat and your budget. Don't ever forget that.
I just want to add one more thing here, Michael, and you'll pick up on it as well. I mean, we have cybersecurity insurance. It's helpful, but it doesn't protect against all cyber incidences, especially if there's a human error, and most of the times it is a human error. So you have to just be aware that, you know, having cybersecurity insurance is important, but it's not going to protect you from a lot of these potential threats. You have a policy in place, follow it. That's, I mean, most of the time it's human error. So, but I just wanted to touch base on the on cybersecurity insurance.
Right, Anthony. That's like with the bank. If you make, let's just say a Zelle transfer from your account to somebody else's, and it wasn't the one you meant to make, and it was to some fraudulent person, they're not going to cover that because you approved that transfer. So you're out. No matter, you can stand on your head till you're blue in the face, right? So I have to imagine that this is kind of the same thing, right? Because it was you actually allowed it. Why is the insurance company going to cover it?
Yeah, exactly.
So I think let me go for this last polling question, and then we can summarize our discussion. Okay, so that was the last polling questions. The people who answered 3 out of 4 will get the CP certificate, and we will issue them. So before we conclude our conversation, right? So what is the last advice you would tell to the emerging managers that they should do this thing after listening this webinar? Michael, first from you.
I think he froze.
Right.
It looks like there we go.
Well, we've hit training hard. We've definitely talked about policies at the end of the day, and take cyber seriously. And by seriously, I mean, develop a program. A lot of our clients want a piece of paper, and we won't do that. It's not worth it, and it doesn't help them. A real program, focus on being serious about it. Tone has to come from the top. And remember, it's not a fire and forget activity. Cyber's like AML. It's not going away. It's just not. And criminals aren't going away, and SEC enforcement is definitely not going away. So I would say, instead of trying to avoid it or wait it out, get out in front of it, because even if you avoid the SEC enforcement, it's the reputational issue that could really bite you in the six.
Awesome, thank you. Anthony?
Yeah, I think it's being educated, right? Realizing that this is a real threat, and lean on your service. If you're a manager, fund manager, lean on your service providers. Ask questions. Everyone is willing to help, because we want to make sure that for me personally, I want to make sure my clients are playing it safe as well, because again, that's liability on EFSI. So I'm trying my best to make sure that we're safe, and I want to make sure our clients are safe. So that we're not potentially having an incident that could cost everyone a lot of money. So
right. Steve, thank you.
So my view here is emerging managers need to start looking at this like they would look at any other service provider, right? You're an emerging manager, you're bootstrapping, you don't have a team of 20 with a real CFO and a segregated COO and all this other stuff. It would behoove them to look at some kind of third-party help in order to protect not only their investment, but their investors' investments in them.
For me, this is a serious threat for emerging managers. They need to take it seriously and take proactive actions before they are victim. Sometimes they say, "Oh yes, we heard," but they don't take any action. They think that it's not an issue for them. But these criminals can really go after small emerging managers to big seasoned managers. So no one is exception to that. So everyone should take this threat seriously. Even our accounting firm, we don't deal with the money or money transactions, but after this discussion with Michael and Anthony and Steve, I'm thinking is we should have our own training program, and we should definitely consult Michael on that and see what he can give us more, right? So it's not about the money, but also like phishing and all of those threats which are relevant to accounting firms too, because there is a treasure here living within a CPA firm, from personal data to very important data. So I think we should take more active effort to protect the data for our clients. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate all your time and wish you all the best. And we will be coming back again next month with a different topic with a different group of people. Thank you once again.
Yeah.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.